coming up on Rose's edge, which will help the young rose as it moves from its bare root stage. But it does give me the perfect excuse to break away for a moment. It's such a huge change caused by something so simple. But if we can cause the acidity to fall into the exact band, the one that's ideal for them, they'll perform even better, which means healthier plants with more abundant flowers. When we got here, they were feral and stringy, with a whole host of bugs. And I like this guy, he makes me laugh. What we've done is make this soil young and vital again. Hello. We moved here about 6 months ago and took on this classic Aussie garden from a certain era. Sadly, the plants themselves have been neglected for a long time, and the roses that formed the backdrop of that garden were in need of some love. This is how I restored them and fixed the soil, which was sandy with poor drainage, to grow healthy, vibrant, and successful roses. The strip is dominated by 7 icebergs. They're a bit gnarly now, but that's okay. When we got here, they were feral and stringy, with a whole host of bugs, and I like this guy, he makes me laugh, and scale, and black spot. Given the right rose, this fungal disease will strip away its foliage and flowers, but there's another invisible force at work here, stressing the plant and sapping its strength to fight back. So, what's making them sick? There's a few places you can look, and normally the answer will be hiding here. We need to know if there's a lack of water causing the problem. A good way to answer this question is just by pressing your finger under the surface of the soil. You've got very sensitive fingertips, and they'll let you know if something is pretty moist or very dry. The next step is just to check underneath the leaves and around the branches and canes, because this is where the pests or fungus will be hiding. You know, roses have got their own encyclopedic library of all the different diseases and blights and canker and borers and suckers and spider mites. Everyone loves the rose, it seems. With so many pests, sometimes you will find a problem you don't recognise. Take a photo and match it online. This will be the quickest way to identify not just the cause, but also the treatment. But these scary guys are not the problem here. It was more in the soil itself. Near the icebergs is a large old frangipani tree and a Tibucaina Kathleen. See, I did say it was a classic Aussie garden from a certain era. And I'm beginning to suspect that some of the secretions from these larger plants are combining with the sand in the soil, and that all of this is creating hydrophobic soil, or soil that repels water at the surface and just allows it to run off. This part of the garden has a steep slope, and you can see that underneath the soil is still very dry. In fact, the water's passed it by and it remains very powdery. So the next thing to do is level the soil. I also made moats around the bases of each of the icebergs to let the water soak in. But you want a reconstruction of this, don't you? Thought so. This is just this sandy garden soil with nothing else in it. And I've made a round moat for it, just like I did for the icebergs. And I added 1 litre of water from a watering can. Not much. I thought this would take about 4 minutes to soak through, but actually, the clock just kept going and going and going. Or not going, if you prefer. It actually took just over 15 minutes before it completely soaked through. And even then, just by brushing the surface, you can see that the crust comes away to reveal dry, powdery sand underneath. Remember, the garden itself is on a slope, so even in heavy rain, most of that water was just bypassing the surface completely and continuing its journey down the hill, without any of that moisture ever reaching the roots below the soil. So this compacted, unloved, sandy and hydrophobic soil clearly has problems. But actually, it's easy to fix. We just need to add some organic components. So the first thing that I'm going to add is some cow manure. There's other components you can add to retain the moisture. I'm using perlite here, which will aerate the soil and also hold on to some of that moisture until the roots need it. And this absorbent coconut coir soil, which has got a lovely texture to it. Some more manure. Let this rot in a corner of the garden before you use it. So the mixture now, just for this kind of area here, is sitting at around about 43 centimeters. If you're planting bare root roses, this is more than enough, with your minimum depth needed coming in at around 30 centimeters. And all this manure is great, but if you need a more cost-effective solution and you have the space to compost, this will replace the manure just as well. Another option is to add mycorrhizal fungi to the rose roots. This needs its own video to do it any justice, which is on its way. But it creates an extraordinary organic network and a symbiotic extension to the rose's own roots, which greatly increases their intake of nutrients and water and protects them during drought. Meanwhile, the added organic material is beginning to change the texture of the soil. It's kind of behaving in quite a liquid way, even though it's dry in the way that it's just flowing back in on itself. Some moisture will help it hold its own shape. This is an optional extra. I'll put this tailored potting mix around the root ball. It contains trace elements and water crystals, which will help the young rose as it moves from its bare root stage. But it does give me the perfect excuse to break away for a moment and talk about soil pH. Roses like a slightly acidic soil, but the sandy soil here is more acidic than their ideal band. But that's not the end of the world. They're hardy creatures despite their rep, and those gnarly old icebergs can attest to just how happily they've survived for all these years in sandy soil. But if we can cause the acidity to fall into the exact band, the one that's ideal for them, they'll perform even better, which means healthier plants with more abundant flowers. And that's really why we're going to all this trouble in the first place. But more on this later. So that mix is probably about 30% organics now, 40% organics. But already you can see that there's a difference between the colour and slightly the texture as well. And of course there's only really one more thing to do now. I'm gonna try the mound test on it again. Same as before, 1 litre from the watering can, not much. And this time there's no need for the fast forward graphics. Because it just didn't take long enough to need any. That was it. So we've only been going a minute and 28, and it's already soaked into the surface. That's really impressive because remember it took 15 minutes last time. There's not really much point running the camera much longer. I mean, it's soaked in. It's such a huge change caused by something so simple, but sometimes that's all you need. And this angry soil has calmed and let the moisture in again. And this returns life to so many parts of its own cyclical system. Or, put more immediately, many players will benefit from this, not just some rose roots. What we've done is make this soil young and vital again. And it's not just taking this moisture in, it's celebrating that moisture. It's also offering up trace elements which will keep the plant and its foliage healthy and boost flower production during the growing season. Plus it will attract earthworms and other helpful organisms, and once mulched, create a real ecosystem under the surface. The conditioning has also caused something else to happen. And the best way to show this is with this pH testing kit. Remember, roses like their soil just slightly acidic, whereas sandy soil is a little more acidic than they prefer. You can see that with the conditioning we've added to our soil, the acidity has moved into a range between 6 and 6.5. And for roses, that's the perfect reading. So our sandy soil was hydrophobic, and rather than leaving behind moisture after rainfall, instead the drops were being repelled at the surface, with the slope just forcing them to run away. Making a level moat at the base of the rose and mulching prevents this runoff and allows the moisture to soak in. Aerating the soil, adding organics and regular mulching will eliminate this problem. Meantime, our conditioning has helped moisture retention and enriched the ecosystem under the surface, allowing us to grow perfect roses in sandy soil. But that's not the end of the story. Sandy soils can have other problems, and sometimes it's less about getting the moisture in so much as getting it out again. There's a big lump of sandstone about 1/2 meter below the rose, so everything's like it's in a giant container pot. So that's another challenge. Ooh, I know that sounds dramatic, but no rose can survive here if I can't solve this. That's a drainage problem. Plus, we've looked at fixing sandy soil by digging in organic components, which is fine for new roses. But what about the existing roses in your garden? Let's look at solving these problems in part 2. Thanks for watching, and I really hope this has been of use. Take care.